The book of BaMidbar begins with a counting, right, a census. Now, in general, a census is frowned upon by the Torah. Hashem doesn't like us counting Jews. You know, we have a custom that we don't count Jews at all. But certainly here, we see that that's the case. Yet the Torah has a number of times where the Jews are counted. And that, of course, is the exclusion to the rule, because when Hashem says you should count, then you count. But in general, we're not supposed to count. And there's a few things here that come across that are interesting. It says that you count. It says here, "Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe midbar Sinai." Right. So it says Hashem speaks to Moshe in the desert of the Sinai desert. Oel Moed. So now they're in the Mishkan, right, in the gathering part. Be'echad lechodesh hasheni, in the first day of the second month. B'shana hasheni, it's in the second year. Let's say some Eretz Yisrael, when they came out of Egypt, right? So they're telling you where we are, and then he says the following: Su'u es rosh kol adas b'nei Yisrael. You should lift up the heads of all of the gathering of the Jewish people, l'mishpuchosam, based on their families, l'beis avosam, based on their father's household, b'misbar-Shemos, and the number of them, kol zachar l'gulasam, every male. Right, it says according to the count of each individual. Ben Esrim Shana B'mala. Each one is 20 years old and older. So you only count the men, and you only count them over 20 years. From here we can extrapolate that there were more people, of course, because there were also women, there were also children, but there were also people under 20. So the number of things come up. First thing is, you notice you have to be 20 years old before you're counted. So in the census. Right? The idea is that there's something significant about 20. So it tells us that a 20-year-old is at the age where that they become involved in having to fight. Because if there's going to be a war, a 20-year-old goes to war. Right? Under 20, they don't go. But right, in the world that we live in here, you have like 18-year-olds go to the army, they get drafted. It's a similar idea, except with us, the going to the army is not the significant thing. What's really important is at the age of 20 is when someone is considered to be now involved in community, to be a part of community. Part of community is also being responsible for the community, so that means if it's necessary to fight, then you fight, right, for the community, for the sake of the Jewish people. But it also means that you're considered now an integral part of the community. When a person is a 13 or 12, a bar or bar mitzvah, they become at the beginning of their adult life. But not until they hit the age of 20 are they considered to be fully adults. And at that point, people who are heavily involved in the success or failure of the community, it lies on their shoulders when you have to be 20 years old. However, we're going to learn later that the tribe of Levi was not counted at the age of 20. You know, they were counted, how old they were? 5. They were 30 days old. 30 days, from 30 days old. So if the reason somebody is counted at 20 is because that's when they become considered a part of the community, why would you count a Levi at 30 days old? They're certainly not that part of the community. They're babies. Like, what kind of what's a baby going to do? Right? Is it going to be the treasurer of a orphanage? It can't do anything. So the fact is that the difference in the two is that a regular Jew should feel within themselves that they want to be active in community. They want to, because what each one of us does for the sake of a community is what makes the community work. Right? Even here in our shul, if I don't have people who are setting up kiddush, and people who are ordering food, and people who are sitting on the board, and people who are working with the youth, if I don't have those things happening, then our community will fall apart. I need people to be a part of it. Sometimes it's a matter of they have to donate money. Sometimes they have to donate money for specific causes. Whatever it is that a person does to involve themselves in community is extremely important. But in general, a person is not mature enough to be able to do this until they're 20. And even then, while it's a good thing to do, and it's a necessity, a person is not required to do it. Like the Torah doesn't say, you must get involved in Jewish organizations. Right? It doesn't say that. You know that in order for Jewish organizations to function, you have to be involved. You need someone to run the mikvah. Somebody needs to run the schools. Somebody needs to deal with the synagogues. So you need people involved. But it doesn't say in the Torah that you have a mitzvah. One of the mitzvahs is you have to sit on the board of a synagogue. There's no such mitzvah. So as a regular Jew has the ability to choose how and when they get involved. But it's not the same with a Levi. A Levi's life, from the moment they're born, well, almost the moment they're born, 30 days after they're born, is chosen for them. A Levi is involved in community, period. That's what they do. A Levi doesn't have his own land. A Levi is involved in the BaMidbar-Shavuot, involved in the temple, totally involved in working for the Jewish people. That's their entire life. So therefore, it's very appropriate that from the time they're 30 days old, that they would then be counted, because from the time they're 30 days old, they are supposed to be living human beings, and all living human beings who are from the tribe of Levi are involved in the community. Period. Their whole life, whatever they do. And why 30 days then? Why not 10 days or 40 days? Because according to Jewish law, if a person has a baby, and the baby's born, and God forbid the baby dies, for whatever reason, that the baby's not 30 days old yet, you don't sit Shiva for the baby. And the rules aren't the same. Because until the baby is 30 days old, it's not considered as if it has what we call a chazaka, or it's established that it's alive. In other words, it's alive, of course, but it has to live 30 days, and then you say, this baby lived 30 days, he's going to live his whole life. If a baby doesn't live 30 days, already you know there was something wrong with it when it was born. So you say that in order for a baby to be considered that it has potential really to live its whole life, it has to live for 30 days. So when a Levi is alive for 30 days, it means now he's going to grow up. He's going to become an adult. So he now already at 30 days is counted as a part of the community. Because a Levi's life is dedicated. A Levi does not have that choice. And when it says a Levi, it means a Kohen as well. Because a Kohen is a sub-tribe of Levi. Levi is one of the 12 tribes. And a Kohen is a part of Levi. Because how do we get Kohens? A Kohen is somebody who's the offspring of Aaron. Right? Aaron the Kohen. So what was Aaron's family? Aaron was a Levi. Himself, he was a Levi. His brother Moshe was a Levi. His father was the head of the Levium, Avram. So he was a Levi. But because of his particular way of things that he did in his life, he was given a special blessing that his children should be the Kohanim. But they're all part of the tribe of Levi. So the Kohanim and the Levium, their lives are totally dedicated. So that's from the time they're 30 days old. And which shows you that their involvement is considered the same as the involvement of an older person who's 20. But because the 20-year-old has a choice, we wait until they're 20 to see what they're doing. But a Levi and a Kohen, they don't have a choice. They are involved. That's why a person who's a Levi or a Kohen doesn't have, in the days of the temple, they don't have a career. You don't have a lawyer who's a Kohen. You don't have a doctor who's a Kohen. They're Kohens. That's what they do. That's who they are. They're born to work in the temple. They don't work in the temple every day, but that's what they do. They work in the temple. And in fact, when every tribe got land, Hashem said to Abraham, your children will inherit the land of Israel. So later on, he divided up the land of Israel to all the different children, but each one got a different piece. But the tribe of Levi doesn't get a piece because they have to live in certain cities. And they're totally dedicated to working in the temple. So they didn't have their own land. They weren't farmers. They were very, very specifically dedicated. So that's why it tells us that right in the beginning. Now, interestingly enough, it says when you're counting someone, it says instead of saying you count all of the children of Israel from the time they're 20, right, all of the men, it says you should su'u es rosh, which means you should raise up the head. Raise up the head. How does raising up the head count somebody? So certainly if you have a room full of people and you say to people, okay, who wants to be counted? You raise your hand. So it's raising your hand is our form of raising someone's head. It means you stand up tall, you're going to be counted. But it also has a different meaning, which is that when you count a person, what you're doing is, like it says in the Torah, it says that if you have a bunch of diamonds, let's say you've got 50 diamonds, you keep them in a velvet bag, what does a person with 50 diamonds do? In general, that person takes them out of the bag, and he puts them on a black velvet cloth, and he counts them. And he looks at each one, because each one's worth a lot of money, each one's special to him, and he counts them. Right? Even though these are, you have them, and they're all in the bag. Nevertheless, that's what you do. You count them, and you move them, and you look at them, because they're very precious to you. The Jewish people are very precious to Hashem. Hashem looks at each one of us and counts each one of us as an individual, even though we're part of a group. When it says you should su'u es rosh, lift up their head, what it's saying is that each Jew should be noticed, should be seen. Like he's standing tall like this, and you should see it. That's how you count them. Just like you count diamonds, you're counting Jews. You're not just a number. Each Jew is different. Each Jew is special. Each Jew is worthy. Each Jew is precious, and therefore you must count each one as they lift up their head as a sign of dignity. And that's why they use that expression here. Now it goes through all the different tribes and it gives you the names of each one. And it says, like, for Reuben, Elitzur ben Shteor, for Shimon, Shlumiel ben Surishadai, for Yehuda, Nachshon ben Aminadav. It tells you the names after each one. What are these names? These are the names of the Nasi, the prince. That is, the head of the tribe. Each tribe had a head. And the head of each tribe, right, represented the tribe in, like, sort of the council, so that whenever you needed, like, a leader for the tribe, he was the leader of the tribe. But whenever you needed to represent the tribe to the Jewish nation, he represented the tribe. So here the Torah is telling you each person from each one of the tribes. And then it goes in further, and it tells you each one, and it tells you how many people were in each one of the groups. And it's an interesting thing here. You'll notice that all of the tribes are given numbers, and the numbers are pretty large. If you want to say of all of the tribes, which tribe has the smallest number? So it's interesting, because here you have the Jews are coming out of Egypt. They've only come out of a year before. According to this is the second year. So here they're counting them from the second year they come out of Egypt. So you'd say the following. What happened in Egypt? In Egypt you had all of the Jews were slaves. And the Egyptians were pretty tough on them, and they killed them, and they abused them. And the people, right, were overworked. And you think they don't have much time or enjoyment or desire to have children. Why should I have a child if the child's just going to be born to be a slave? Just going to be killed. So even though people had children, you would think that if you were in a tribe that was being in slavery and being tortured the way they were, you wouldn't have very many kids. On the other hand, the tribe of Levi, right, they weren't like that. The tribe of Levi were, even during the slavery in Egypt, they were treated differently. Pharaoh treated them differently. One of the rules that Yaakov made was that all priests, no matter what religion they were excluded from the taxes and other things that Pharaoh made. One of the things they were excluded from was the hard work that the slaves had. So originally all the Jews were considered priests by Pharaoh, but then there's a new Pharaoh comes, and he's the one who enslaves the Jews, and he says that only the priests of the Jews are priests, not all the Jews. So therefore the tribe of Levi does not have to do the work like the slave work of the rest of the Jews, and they're not beaten and they're not tortured like the rest of the Jews. So you'd think, well, if you had to pick which tribe would be the biggest, it would be the tribe of Levi, because they've got it easy, right? All the other tribes which are being beaten and tortured and they're working 20-hour days, they're not going to have too many children. They're going to be the smallest tribes. But if you look at it, Levi is the smallest tribe. It makes no sense. So the point is that according to logic, if you go to a doctor or let's say an anthropologist, and you'd ask that anthropologist, so look, I've got 12 tribes of Jews, 11 of the tribes are slaves, one tribe's not a slave, which one's going to have the most children? He would say, hands down, the one that's not a slave is going to have the most children. They've got time, they have the ability, they're not being tortured, they're not exhausted, they'll have them. And yet there was the opposite. And the point is that Hashem is sending us a message, which is that very often man plans, and God laughs at man's plans. Yet man plans all these things. I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and then this will happen, and I'll do this, this, and this, and I'll have a great life. And then they find out it doesn't happen. Like how many times we meet people who studied to become a doctor, and became a doctor and never practiced. Or became a dentist and never practiced. Became a lawyer, never practiced. Became an accountant, never practiced. Why? Because that's not what they were supposed to be. Right? They wanted to be an accountant or a doctor or a lawyer, and then Hashem sent them other opportunities, and they didn't do it. Right? They found themselves in something else, and they didn't know they were going to. They thought they were going to do whatever they're doing. You see it all the time with people who study and they go to school with the idea to become one thing, and they become something totally different. Right? And because that's not what they were supposed to be. They were supposed to be what they ended up becoming, and that fit them very well. They just didn't know it. So that idea comes because we plan and we plan and we plan, and things don't always work out the way we plan. But Hashem plans, and it always works out His way. So we plan, the tribe of Levi, we know that according to nature should be the biggest tribe. But God says no, they're going to the smallest tribe. The biggest tribe is going to be a slave. And so it makes no sense. Slaves didn't have many children. God says, well, that's what you think. They had more children. And that's what it tells us. So we learn a lesson here that we're supposed to plan for ourselves, and we're supposed to do the best we can to make sure that our lives are productive and useful and that we're responsible people. But we should not feel that because we do that everything's going to be the way we want it to be. There are always types of things that are going to happen and be different. And we don't realize it at first, and then we find out that that's the case. So a person will, you'll have a woman will say, I only want to marry a man who's 4 inches taller than me and he's got blonde hair. And she ends up marrying a guy who's shorter than her with black hair. And she has a very happy life. And you say, well, how could that be? She only had one rule. She wanted the guy who had blonde hair, or you wanted the guy who was 6'4". That's all she wanted. And she marries a guy who's 5'2". So, and yet she's happy. Because man can plan all he wants, and you're supposed to plan. But your plans don't always work. Sometimes your plans are off base, and God gives you the real answer. So that's what that tells you there. And most of the parsha goes through all these numbers, number after number after number, of what happens here. One of the interesting ones is that you read in here, beginning in 733 and 735, about flags. Hashem tells that each tribe should have a flag. It's a funny thing, because nations have flags, right? The Canadians have a flag. Every country has a flag. A flag is very important, right? It's a rallying point. It's a central thing that you look at to be inspired. Right? You see, I'm not sure exactly why, but we look at our flag and it's got a maple leaf on it. Now I know why, because we have maple trees. But why that might inspire us, I'm not so sure. But the idea is that the flag itself, that having a flag makes you feel patriotic. Having a flag, and that idea comes from here. Now you think that a flag is a very mundane thing, but it's not. First thing is an interesting thing is that the word for these flags here is called a nes. Right, Ness, and what's interesting is that we call a flag a degel. Right, when you talk about a flag in Israel, it's called a degel, but the Torah calls it a nes, and that's the same word as the word for miracle, which is nes, same word, and that's because what is a miracle? A miracle is a flag that God puts in the world to show you that He's there. Like if every day water always goes to the lowest point, suddenly one day the water splits. And the Jews walk through it, and as soon as the Egyptians come in it, it closes again. So you say, that's a nace, that's a miracle, right? So what is it? It's a flag. God's sending up a flag, saying, look, I exist. Look at me. God exists. It's a flag. So when the Jewish people had flags, the flags were a symbol of something special about them, about each group. So each group had a flag, and for the most part, the flags were represented with a symbol that had something to do with the blessing that Jacob gave them. Because when Jacob died, he gave a blessing to each of his sons. And that blessing described who they were, and it gave them certain promises for the future. So for instance, there's a very interesting one is Yisachar and Zvulun. These are two brothers. Yisachar it says that his flag had the sun and the moon on it, and it was because he understood Torah. He was the scholars. The tribe of Yisachar were scholars, and part of being a scholar was they knew about the new moon. So they were able to judge when the new moon would come. So that's why you have the sun and the moon and the stars on their flag, because they understood how the world worked, because they were great scholars. But in order for them to be great scholars, they had to learn, which means they couldn't work very much. So how did they live? So they had a brother named Zvulun, and Zvulun was another one of the tribes, and his flag shows a ship. And it's because they were merchant marines. They were sailors, and their job was to make money to support themselves and to support their brother Yisachar, who couldn't work for a living. And they sort of split their money with their brother, and the brother split his Torah knowledge with his brother. Right? That's how they worked it, Yisachar and Zvulun. But if the purpose of Zvulun was to provide a living for Yisachar, and his whole idea of providing a living for him was because he cared for his brother and he wanted to do the right thing. You'd think Hashem would give him a job that's a little bit easier to do. What does he make him do? He makes him a merchant marine. That's a tough job. You read in the Torah, in the Gemara, about what it's like to be a sailor. A sailor would go away for a year, right? Like he'd stay away from his family for a year because you can't fly around. You get on a boat and you're gone, right? It's dangerous. The person who lives on a boat knows that their very life is in peril every day. Something can happen every day to you on the ocean. You got a bad storm, you can sink. You can have you imagine on these cruises, you read about other cruises, somebody gets sick on a cruise, and it's a big emergency because everyone will get sick on the cruise. You get a cruise with 3,000 people today, and some people get sick. You're going to have 3,000 sick people on a cruise, right, in the middle of the ocean. It's not very good because it's a very dangerous way of living, all right, on a ship. It's nice for us. We can go on a cruise, and in general, we don't get, we don't sink off the shore of Italy. But even though it happens, but it doesn't happen very often. Right? Usually, you have a very nice time. But the fact is, going on a ship, be it a cruise or for work, or whatever reason, is dangerous. You're on the water. You're totally stuck. Whatever nature, so to speak, Hashem causes nature to do, a bad storm, a tidal wave, whatever it is. You're in the middle of the ocean. There's nothing you can do, and you're going to get it. Whatever is happening, you're going to get to. So you say, why doesn't Hashem make it? So if this guy is dedicating his life to support himself and to support his brother who learns Torah, why doesn't Hashem make it a little easier on the guy? Make him a tribe of accountants, a tribe of lawyers, a tribe of doctors, so that they can make a living without having to be crazy going on a ship like that. So it says that there's a specific reason that Hashem made it that the tribe of Zvulun would have to be sailors. And that's because the Gemara says that the majority of sailors are true believers in God. And the reason is, of course, because they go out in the ocean and they see how many things can happen to them. They could kill them, and yet they live. Right? They could fall off the boat, and there could be a tidal wave, and the boat will sink. There could be a fire on the boat, and there's nothing you can do to fix it. There can be all kinds of things that happen. Bad weather and storms, all kinds of things that could make your life miserable or kill you when you're on a boat, right? So then let's make it so that if there's such good people, right, let's make it that they don't have to go on a boat. But by going on a boat, it says in the Talmud that the majority of sailors are righteous people. And we don't see it that way. Like when we think about it, we think about pirates, right? We go around killing people and taking the women and stealing all the stuff. But the fact is a person goes and lives on the ocean and they see how many miracles have to happen to them to stay alive. So that in such a case, the sailor who does that, right, is a believer in God. So one of the important messages that Hashem wanted that Zvulun, on the one hand, should provide, but he should realize he's not doing it himself. God's involved. The fact that a guy can sail around the world and buy spices in China and sell it in India, and go from India with cotton and sell it in Spain, and go from Spain with chocolate and sell it in Jamaica, right? He's going to make money doing this by going all over the place. That happens, right? That's a way of making a living, but it's a very dangerous way of making a living. And all the time that he's doing this, he's going through storms and problems and maybe fires and maybe sickness and maybe not enough food, and he makes it, right? That causes him to be a believer in God. That, what's saving me from all this trouble is God is saving me. So that's why. So Hashem specifically gave him a difficult job of being a merchant marine, because he wanted to make sure that he was doing it for the right reason. He's working to support his brother because that's what you're supposed to do. It's a mitzvah to help out your brother and to help out yourself so that your brother can learn. So that's one of the reasons that it says that. Now, I don't want to. Let's do one more thing here on page 739, and then we're going to talk about Shavuos. 738 and 739, like right at the end, the third line from the end, 17. These were the sons of Levi. So I told you before, Levi, right? Levi was one of the 12 tribes, and Levi had 3 sons himself. right? And he named one Gershon, Kahas, and Merari. So why were they named that? So Gershon, Kahas, and Merari, where Gershon is Gersham, I was a stranger there. I was a stranger in a strange land. Kahas comes from a word to mean to grind, like you grind your teeth, and that's what it is. They ground their teeth in pain, like the slaves, right? What happened there. And Merari comes from mar, bitter. Life is bitter. So here Levi names his children for the bitter life that the Jewish people were having. What do I mean? They were slaves. The Jews were sent to Egypt to be slaves. And I told you before, Levi was not a slave. All the rest of the Jews were slaves, but the tribe of Levi were not slaves. So you'd think that if anybody's going to name their kids about the slavery, it's going to be anybody but Levi, because Levi didn't experience it. But that's not true. The symbol of a Jew is that a Jew feels the pain of other people. And here you have Levi, and he's living with the rest of the Jews. The rest of the Jews are slaves, and he's not. And his job, and his tribe's job, is to try to give a spiritual life to these people, to the rest of the Jews while they're slaves. They were the priests. They were the educators. And Levi had a message. The message was, if my brothers are in pain, I'm in pain. If the Jews are slaves, and I'm not a slave, I feel the pain of being a slave. So he named his children for the pain that his brothers went through. As I said, Gershon, I was a stranger in a strange land, the Jews in Egypt. Kahas, and I ground my teeth in pain, like you know how you clench your teeth when you're in pain. And Merari, I have a bitter life, a life of bitterness, right? Which Levi didn't have any of that. But Levi felt the pain of his brothers, so he wanted to name his children after that, even though he himself didn't experience it. And it's a very important idea that there are actually laws about it. That when Jews are in pain, you're not allowed to act normally. In fact, there's a law that says that in a time when Jews are being attacked and things are very bad, you're not supposed to have relations, it says, because having relations is pleasurable, and Jews are being killed, and you're having relations. Is that right? Now, that's just a concept, but when we think about the idea in general, when a Jew in one country bleeds, a Jew in another country feels the pain. Right? They tell a lot of stories about this, but probably one of the most famous ones is with the story about the big blood libel case that happened in Russia. There were many, but there was one real famous one with Mendel. What was his last name? Bilas, I think it was. And he was one of the real famous ones. They made a movie about it, and he was charged with blood libel. Blood libel was where the Jews would take Christians, like little Christian children, and kill them and use their blood to make matzah. This is what the Christians were saying. And they find one time they charged this man of taking a Christian child. They found this dead Christian child, and they said it was him who did it, and he used the blood to make matzah. And they put him on trial, and they wanted to convict him for murder. And it says there was an outcry from Jews all over the world that they were upset by this. And so it says that they sent a rabbi, and he had lawyers, of course, to come for the case. And the judge asked the lawyer, like, what is this? You have all of these Jews coming and complaining about this guy, but he's a Russian Jew. This man's a Russian Jew. You're a British Jew, and you're a French Jew. Like, what do you have to do with this? There's nothing to do with you. So he said, he answered in a very interesting way, because one of the things that came up in the trial was that this trial was going to be used to try to attack Judaism. So one of the things that the prosecutor found out is that there's a piece of Talmud that says that Rak Yisrael Korim Adam, only the Jewish people are called Adam, man. Let's translate it as man. Only the Jewish people are called man. Ve'ein umas olam korim Adam, and the nations of the world are not called man. That's like I'm saying only the Jews are human. The rest of the world is not human. Now, this is not what it means. But this is what this prosecutor, the Russian prosecutor, said. This is what it means. So he asked this. He wanted to attack Judaism. So the defense lawyer asked the rabbi, how do I answer this question? Because they're going to ask me this question. What do I say? So the rabbi says the following. He says, if you have a Jew who's in pain in one part of the world, like here in Russia, Jews all over the world feel it. They all feel the pain. If you have a Frenchman who's not Jewish, just a Frenchman, right, who gets in trouble, and he's going to be prosecuted, do people who come from France who live in America, right, do they feel the pain? No, they're not French. They're Americans. They came from France, okay, but they don't feel the pain. So he says, so this is how you answer the question. When Adam, the first man, was created, all children came from Adam. There's no human being in the world that didn't come from Adam. Everybody came from Adam. Jewish and non-Jewish, white, black, yellow, everybody came from Adam. Adam was the first human. Adam and Eve, the first ones. So any human in the world came from them. So if that's the case, that they all came from them, that means that if anything happens to one of them, the rest are all brothers. And one brother cares for the other brother, right? You have a brother, the brother cares about you. So he says, that's how the Jews are. That's why it says in the Talmud, and I'll quote the same Talmud again, which I didn't translate correctly before. It says, Rak Yisrael Korim Adam, only the Jewish people are called Adam, human. That's not what it means. Jewish people are called Adam because Adam, when any human being was in trouble, Adam said, that's my kid. No matter who it was, this is my children. So the Jewish people say, that person is in trouble, that Jew's in trouble. Doesn't matter that he's from Syria and I'm from the United States. He's a Jew. And I feel his pain and I want to help him. Right? Just like Adam felt the pain of every human because he was the father of every human, the Jews feel the pain of all other Jews because we're all related. Right? He says you don't have that with the French, you don't have that with the British, you don't have it with the Italians. They're not like that. We're like that. So when the Talmud doesn't say only Jews are human and non-Jews aren't human, that's not what they're saying, and that's a horrible thing to say. It says that only Jews believe that we're related to all other Jews. The rest of the world doesn't believe that for themselves. So therefore, when they have this case now, and he gets up and he says, what it means is that when you tell me, like, what does it mean that only Jews are called human? It doesn't mean that. It means only Jews act like Adam. Adam felt loss of every single human because every single human was his son, his grandson, his great-grandson. It came from him. But the rest of the world's not like that. Only the Jews are like that. So you want to say who is called Adam? The Jews are called Adam, nobody else. Because we're like Adam, and that we do that. So then when they said in this case with this blood libel, you had Jews from all over the world who never met the man, who had nothing to do with it, were all repenting, and they were fasting, and they were sending money, they were doing everything they could to try to free this Jew. Because we all care for each other, we're all related. And that's why you have here that Levi, who was not involved in the slavery, named his kids for the slavery. Because for him, his brothers were enslaved, and it was like he was enslaved, and therefore he named his children that way because they're his future. And you need to know that when one Jew's in pain, all Jews bleed. Right? That's how it works, and that's what it says here. Right, let's switch now to a couple of things about Shavuos. One thing about Shavuos is that we read a Megillah on Shavuos. We read on every one of our holidays. We read a Megillah. We have 5 Megillahs, 5 different things at times that we read it. On Shavuos we read the book of Ruth. And who was Ruth? Ruth was a Moabite. Now you got to understand, who are the Moabites? They were disgusting people, certainly in those days. They were corrupt. They were sexually corrupt. They did terrible things. And where did they come from? So the first Moabite was a person named Moab, right? That's why it's called that. Where did he come from? Do you remember?
From Lot.
From Lot. When Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters escaped from Sodom, right, the world blew up. They come out of Sodom, they were running in the desert, and they look behind them, and the whole country is destroyed. Right? Everything's destroyed. God sends down fire on this country. So Lot's wife turns around, she dies. Now you have Lot and his 2 daughters. They go running off into the hills. Now they're living in the hills, and they look around and they say, there's nobody left. The world's destroyed. We're the only human beings left in the world. Now they were wrong, but that's what they thought. They thought we're the only human beings left. So they went and they had relations. these girls had relations with their father in order to have children, so that the world would be populated again. So after they did this, and they both became, what they did is their father wouldn't have relations with them, so they got him drunk, and then they had relations with him when he was drunk. So they both got pregnant. Then they find out that the world wasn't destroyed. Only Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. But really, the rest of the world is still there, and now we're in trouble because we just committed incest. Right? Even though they had a good reason, they thought they were saving the world, but they did that. So the two sisters decide that they're going to respond differently. One sister calls her son Ammon, because he comes from my people. That is, it's a hint that her father was the father, my people. The other one calls her son Moab, which means from my father. Just like she says, you don't like that I slept with my father? Too bad. I'm going to put it in your face. Too bad for you. My son's name is my father, from my father. That's his name. My father had relations with me. That's what she named her kid. His name was Moab. And that child, born from incest, born with this chutzpah that his mother had to the world, even though she did a good reason, but she did something wrong, this Moab was a corrupted person, and he lived that way. So now along comes this family, this Jewish family. They're very wealthy, and they're living in Israel, and there's a famine in Israel, and they have to leave. So they go into the land of Moab. And while they're there, the two sons marry Moabite girls, Rus and Orpah. Both of these are from royalty. They're special girls, but they're Moabites. And they lose everything. They die, and the husband died, the father dies. Now you only got Naomi, who is the mother, and these two girls, and her two daughter-in-laws, who are Moabites. And so she says to them, look, I'm penniless, I have no husband, I have no children. Go back to your people, your princesses, you live in a castle. Go back to the Moabites. So Orpah says, you know what, you're right. And she goes off, and she becomes Moabite again. And from her comes a very famous person, Goliath. Goliath, you know, David and Goliath? Goliath, the giant, comes from her. That's one of her grandchildren. Then along comes Rus, the other one, and she says, I'm not going back. Your God is my God. Where you go, I will go. What you do, I will do. That's what she says to her mother-in-law. I'm staying Jewish. Right? So the mother-in-law says, I have no money. I have no children. I have no husband. What are you staying with me for? She says, I believe in this. I'm staying. Now she goes back. Right? Now this Rus, right, comes from Moabites. She's a princess of Moabite. She comes from a place where people are sexual deviants. They're corrupted people. And now she comes back and she wants to convert. Now there's a rule that says a Moabite's not allowed to convert to Judaism because they were so terrible. Right? The way they treated the Jews, the way they acted, they were terrible. So they couldn't convert. They weren't allowed. And then you have this fellow Boaz, who's the leader of the Jews, a very righteous man, who marries her. He converts her and he marries her. So how is he allowed? Because he knew the rule was you're not allowed to convert and marry the men of Moab, but the women could. But nevertheless, there's always a little stain on her. You know, she came from these people, we believe, you know, a person who converts is a Jew, and they're just like us, and you can't treat them badly. But you know that if somebody came from a really disgusting place, and they worked hard on themselves, and they became wonderful people, you know, sometimes people are not so kind, and they don't act correctly when it comes to that. And they're wrong, but we understand it. That's what happened to Rus. Now, on the one hand, so Rus, she comes from her great-grandfather committed incest, right? And that's how her family was born. And she marries Boaz. Where does Boaz come from? Boaz comes from Tamar. And who is that? Tamar was a woman who was married to a son of Yehuda, who was a great son of, right, the leader of the Jews, the son of Yaakov. And she said, and the son, she was a beautiful woman. The son didn't want her to get pregnant because he thought it would make her look ugly. So he wouldn't let her get pregnant, and God causes him to die because he does things he shouldn't do. And another brother marries her, and same thing, and he dies. So now she wants to marry the third brother because she's a righteous woman. It's not her fault that her husbands are doing things wrong, but the father, Yehuda, says no go. 2 of my sons are dead because of you already. I'm not losing the last one. I'm not doing it. So she decides that he's wrong. So she dresses up like a prostitute, and she goes to where prostitutes are. And Yehuda walks by one day, right? Her father-in-law, and somehow he gets this desire to sleep with a prostitute. Now it's out of character for him. He's a judge. He's a great person, but something grabs him. He loses his free will, and he wants to sleep with a prostitute. And there's a prostitute. He doesn't know that it's his daughter-in-law. I mean, she's not his daughter-in-law then because the boys are dead. So he has relations with her. Right now, she gets pregnant, and the offspring of that child goes down generations, becomes Boaz. So now here you have Ruth, right? Ruth comes from incest. And then you've got Boaz, who's the head of the Jews in those days. He comes from also a funny family. I mean, his great grandmother dressed up like a prostitute, had relations with his great grandfather. Right? His great grandfather's going to have her killed because he doesn't know that he's the one who had relations with her. He doesn't know that it's really Tamar, and Tamar is now pregnant. She's not supposed to be doing that. She's not married, right? So also there's sexual funny stuff going on, right? And then you know who their child is? Is the Mashiach. The Mashiach comes from them. So you say it's such a funny thing from such people, right? And the fact is because you look at the people who were involved here, and you see Ruth came from a bad place, but she dedicated herself to be a special person, and she was an amazingly special person. And because of what she did for herself, she was worthy that great things should happen. Tamar gave up her reputation. She dressed like a prostitute. She was a righteous woman who dressed herself up like a prostitute in order to have relations, which the law required her to do. She was supposed to have relations with a member of her family so that she could get pregnant. And nobody would do it because they were all afraid they'd die. So she tricks them into doing it. So here she's got patience and she's got strength to do that. And that's hopefully totally appropriate that the Mashiach should come from that. Because what is the Mashiach, right? What happens is they have a child, and King David is born from that child. King David is the father of Mashiach, as we know. So Mashiach has to have patience. Mashiach has to take nothing from nobody. Mashiach has to stand up for what he believes in, no matter what the world says, just like his mothers did, right? Just like they did, just like Ruth did, just like Tamar did, right? In every case, everything that had anything to do with him had to be with women who had this kind of strength and to become who they were, and that's why the Mashiach comes from them, and it's appropriate, and that's why we read this on holiday Shavuos. Yes.
I don't understand. Like, why did she have to Tamar, right? Have a child with?
Okay, there's a law that says in the ancient times. Today we don't do this, but there's a mitzvah in the Torah that says that if a man and a woman get married, and the man dies without children, right, the woman is obligated to marry the brother of the husband, right? So they can have a child, which will not only be similar to a namesake, but he'll be genetically as close as possible, because you have his own brother who has genetic similarities, and you have his wife who's his spiritual partner. So you take the spiritual partner and a physical, and you put them together, and then you name that child for the brother who died. So, right? That's a law. Today we don't do this anymore. It's just people can't really handle it. But it was an original. It's a law. So when her first husband died, she was then obligated to marry the next brother. Right? Now, they can choose not to, but they have to go through a ritual. Right? In other words, they don't have to, like the brother's like stinky or something. She doesn't have to marry him, right? But if she decides, but they have to go through a ritual. So either she marries him or she goes through this ritual, right? And it's called chalitza, the ritual. So the husband dies, she marries the first brother. He dies without a child. So she wants to marry the next brother. The father says, forget it, you're killing all my kids. He thinks there's something wrong with her, right? Some type of disease or something. So they're not going to let him marry her. So she says, I'm stuck now because I can't marry anybody. Until they do chalitza with me, I can't marry someone else. And I want to marry someone to fulfill this mitzvah. I want someone from the family. I want to do the mitzvah. And the law is that if the brothers can't do it, then the father can do it. So what happens is now, so she tricks the father into having relations with her. Right? That's what she did. So what appeared to be a disgusting thing wasn't at all. But it's just like with Lot's daughters. What they did was a disgusting thing. But they thought that they were being Adam and Eve, that they were repopulating the world. They thought they were doing something good. Right? These types of actions were what the Mashiach has within him. And that's why he comes from him. And we read this on Shavuos for a number of reasons. One is because when we got the Torah, we not only got the written Torah, we got the oral Torah. And the written Torah says a Moabite may not enter the Jewish people, which would mean that Rus could not become Jewish. But the oral law says that's only talking about men. A Moabite woman can. So this is now a celebration by reading this, is a celebration of the oral law as being true. That's one. Second thing is, we know that King David was born on Shavuos. That's when he was born. So there's a relationship there. And all of these things tie together, right? So therefore we see that there's a serious relationship between it. Also, the time of year the story of Rus happens, it says it was the time of the harvesting, which is the holiday of Shavuos. That's when it's harvested. So put this all together, it ties into the holiday of Shavuos, and that's why we read that. So that's one idea. Now another quick thought is that it tells us in the Torah that when the world was created, it says, and it was evening, it was morning on the first day. It was evening, it was morning on the second day, right? Then it goes to the sixth day, and it says it was evening, it was morning on the sixth day. But it's said differently. Every other day says Vayera, Vayiboker, Yom Rishon, Yom Echad, Yom Sheni. But on the sixth day it says Yom Hashishi. And it says the sixth day. Everyone that says it was evening, it was morning, fifth day. It was evening, it was morning, fourth day. It was evening, morning, the sixth day. So that someone says, what's with the? Why are you saying it like it's something special? So it is. Because the hey, ha, right, meaning the, is the fifth day of the month of Sivan. It's symbolic, which is what? The day the Torah is given. Because God says that I created the world for one reason, to give the world the Torah. If they take the Torah, great. If they don't take the Torah, the world will be destroyed. There's no purpose for the world without the Torah. So the hey is put into there to tell you, hey is 5, the fifth day of Sivan is Shavuos, and that's when the Torah is given, and therefore it tells you, you want to know, right, that the purpose of the world being created, the 6 days of creation, are only here for the Torah. So take the Torah, and the world has purpose. No Torah, the world has no purpose. So this is an indication of the seriousness of why the Torah, why we are here. We're brought into this world in order to better ourselves, to better each other, by using the Torah. Without the Torah, we don't have that ability. There is nothing that we could really do in this world that's truly know how to act without the Torah. Whatever ethics we think we can come up on our own, we really can't. Like if we say, oh, we don't need the Torah to tell us not to murder, because I don't want anyone to murder me, so I'm not going to murder anyone else. I don't need the Torah to tell me. I'm not going to steal because I don't want anyone to steal from me. The Torah doesn't have to tell me that. I know that. But it's not true. Right? Is euthanasia murder? Is abortion murder? What's murder? How do you define it? Is going to war murder? If somebody wants to kill you and they have a gun in your forehead, can you kill them? Maybe that's murder. How do we know the answer to these questions? Because the Torah tells you the answer. Right? You have a simple answer, black and white. Yeah, I'm not going to kill someone because I don't want them to kill me. That's simple, right? But am I going to have give a woman an abortion? Okay. Can I do that? Maybe I don't want someone should abort my child. Well, it makes no difference. Is that a life or is it not a life? Is a person dying? Who's dying, right? And a lot of pain. Are you allowed to kill them so they should be out of pain? They're dying anyways. But the Torah says, no, you can't. But how do you know? So the Torah, you need the Torah to tell you everything. The Torah teaches us the truth of how one should live their life. And that's really what it's saying here. So the importance of receiving the Torah on Shavuos is very, very significant. It's a very, very important holiday. And it's also the occasion that we eat dairy. Right? So I always ask people, if you know why we eat dairy, and I always get the same answer. They say, you eat dairy on Shavuos because when the Torah was given, You look into it, and we didn't know how to shecht. You didn't know how to salt. We didn't know how to eat meat, so they ate dairy. So it's a symbol of that, right? But the fact is, the Torah was given. We didn't know how to shecht, and we didn't know how to salt. We didn't know how to eat meat, kosher meat, because the Torah was given. Now I have to keep kosher. We didn't know how. It's just given right now. Except it didn't tell us that. That comes later. Right? That when the Torah was given on Shavuos, the whole Torah wasn't given on Shavuos. We got the 10 Commandments, we got a few mitzvahs. The rest came throughout the whole thing. That's every time it says Ve'adaber Hashem LaMoshe Lemor, right? Every parsha, Hashem says to Moshe, teach the Jewish people the following. He's saying to them, teach them the Torah. I'm giving it to you now. Throughout the entire time in the desert, he gave them pieces of the Torah. It didn't all come on Shavuos. We received the Torah, that God's giving us the Torah, started on Shavuos, but it wasn't finished on Shavuos. So when people say that we eat dairy on Shavuos because we didn't know how to eat meat, well, the fact is we didn't even know that there were rules about eating meat. We didn't even know there were rules about eating milk. So that's not a true answer. People are mistaken when they say that. The truth is that the Torah has symbolized by milk. Milk is what nourishes every living entity. Every mammal, right, lives off milk. And where does milk come from? So milk, according to the Talmud, comes from blood. A woman has blood, or a female has blood, and the blood becomes milk. And you're not allowed to eat blood. We can't eat blood, so how can we eat milk? We eat milk because the Torah tells us we can, but it symbolizes by the Torah. That milk, by the Torah telling us that we can eat milk, it's telling us the milk which comes from the blood of the person, the life force of the person, is being handed over to this next generation, this next child. Just like the Torah. The Torah is the reason we live. I'm handing it over to my child. I want my child to have it. So milk is a symbol of Torah. So therefore, one of the reasons that we eat milk on Shavuos is because it symbolizes Torah. Not because we didn't know how to eat meat. That's what every school kid, you ask your kids when they come home from school, why do you eat milk on Shavuos? And they'll say, because we didn't know how to eat meat. It's not really correct. There might be some way of understanding it, but it's not really correct. Yes?
There's also, I heard about that it's also because Halak is 40 and Moshe was 40 days. Is that another reason?
Sure. Those are all nice ideas, right? Chalav is 40 because the letter Chet, right, is 8, and Lamed is 30, and Base is 2. So 8, 2, and 30 is 40. 40 is the 40 is how many days Moshe was up on the mountain. Also 40 is the numeric value of the word Mayim, the letter Mem from the word Mayim, which is what makes us tahor, makes in the mikvah. There are many allusions to it, but and they're all true. That's why eating milk on Shavuos is a custom. It's not a law. You don't have to eat milk on Shavuos. It's a nice thing to do, right? Because normally you eat meat on a holiday. So on Shavuos, if you want to have a meal with milk, you're allowed because of this concept. But if you don't like milk, or if it's not good for you, or you're lactase deficient, then you don't have to eat it. Right? But most people like to. So like here, we make a kiddush for the kids. We have ice cream, and we have at night. If you come and learn with us at night, so we have this first thing. We start at midnight because it's late. It's summertime, right? Here in this part of the world, in South Africa, you start early, right? You can learn there for 15 hours. Here we learn for 4. So we start at midnight. We have one class that goes from 12 to 1. Then that's enough for us. Now we're going to eat. Right? Now we have cheesecake and lasagna, and that's till about 1:30, and then we go and have classes 1:30 to 2:30, and 2:30 to 3:30, and then 3:30 to 4 I give a talk, and then we pray. The whole night's over. In South Africa, it's 5 o'clock. You start, right? You have a meal by 6:30. You're back in shul, probably even 6 o'clock, and you start. You got all the way, and when does it get light? 8:30 in the morning. So you've got about 11 hours. Right? While we here have 4 hours. We think we're big shots. Right? That's all we have. So, but on the other hand, in South Africa, you have to start lighting. You light your Hanukkah candles 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night, because our winter is their summer. So we light Hanukkah candles at 4:30 in the afternoon, and we're all used to going home from work and seeing all the Hanukkah candles and how pretty it is. In South Africa, you go right. Everyone's in bed at 11 o'clock at night. You're lighting Hanukkah candles. That's how it works. Okay. you all very much. I hope you'll join us on Shavuos. We got lots going on.